So we talk about the 3 C's as it relates to the ministry of our life groups: community, care, Christian growth. Let's start by talking about what gospel-centered care looks like. And I know when we talk about care in our life group, we think about things like thoughtfulness and compassion and meeting the needs of the group when they arise. For you guys, it may look like praying for someone. It may be going and visiting the hospital. It might be a phone call. It might be making a meal. All kinds of things like that. We want all of those things that we do to be fueled by the gospel. And here's the difference that makes. Without the gospel, we can do those same things, but we can get really different results when we do it. If it doesn't connect to Christ's work, what it may end up doing inadvertently is actually just highlighting our work, which isn't the way it's supposed to work. People may look at what you're doing for them and they may greatly appreciate it, but the greater goal is for them to be able to see through you to what God is doing in their life, where you're just a window through which they're able to see the gospel more clearly. When people go through a dark time, we want them to say, not, man, what a great life group leader I had during that time. And I do hope that they say that about you. I think that would be wonderful. But much better if they could say, man, what a great Savior I had during that time, through which people like my life group were the hands and feet of the love and the mercy of Christ. Sometimes shepherding feeds our need to be needed. And folks, that's called codependency, and that's not a good thing, right? In those situations, the leader becomes the savior instead of getting out of the way and letting the savior do his own work. And our efforts may be, in those moments, they may be morally positive, but they may end up being only at best spiritually neutral through that. And that's not just damaging to the people in your life group, it's actually damaging to you as a life group leader, because over time, as you try to care for your group in your own strength, it will damage you. I'll suggest 3 ways that it does it. I think that it can make us weary. I think that we will come to expect reciprocity, and over time we may even become resentful. Let me explain what I mean by that. We grow weary when we are ministering out of our own strength. So we find ourselves saying things like, she is so needy right now, it's just exhausting. I don't think I can take another day of her. We expect reciprocity when we forget grace. We forget that grace is one way. That's how we received it from Christ. It's undeserved. It's a sacrifice, and it's a pouring out. And when we remember that, then we can do what Jesus did. We can give without that expectation or understanding of what comes back in return. But when we forget the gospel, now we can easily slip into this place of expecting reciprocity, expecting I gave something, so you should give something. We helped, maybe you found yourself saying, we helped them move. The least they could do is sign up for refreshments, right? Worst of the 3, in our own power, over time, we can become very resentful if we try and care without the gospel. We forget that he who has been forgiven much loves much. And so instead of meeting other people in their weaknesses, we actually become surprised at their weaknesses. We can't believe that we have sinners in our life group. Nobody's committed to this group anymore. They don't even respond to our emails. I don't see any commitment to this place. They seem so unappreciative. I'm so tired of their whining. Maybe you've said some of those things along the way in your darker moments. And all of those things, maybe they're true, right? But we can gain a greater resilience as leaders when we fall back on the reality that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8. If God can invest in me as a person who definitely doesn't have it all together, then now I'm better enabled on the days that I remember that to invest in a life group full of people who, guess what, don't have it all together either. That I can be patient with their weakness because I remember how patient God has been with mine. And so what happens to the care components of your community when the gospel is central? I just talked about some ways in which it can really become a mess when it's not. But first of all, you see your role as an investment that's born out of what's been invested in you. Matthew 10:8 says, freely you have received, freely give. Jesus Christ is the grace motivation behind every place where you extend yourselves. And so it changes your motivation when you remember those things. It also changes your place of strength. because you're not relying on your own strength anymore. You're reminded that you're dependent on God's grace to meet the needs of others and not just your own efforts. And among other things, I think that probably makes us a more prayerful life group leader when we remember this is about His work, not my work. We're seeking Him for the outcomes, not us. And I think keeping grace central also frees you as a leader. You're free from being preoccupied with what people think of you. You're free from being overly dependent on the appreciation of others to just keep you going along the way. You're free also to share your struggles along the way as an example of a desperate need for Jesus. It's our weakness, actually, that's often, as leaders, our place of greatest strength. You remember that Paul writes, God comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. So now you care for people not as the strong helping the weak. You're not treating people as a project, but you are communicating as someone who is desperately in need of Jesus, who is clinging to the cross, and who is ministering to others who are desperately in need of Jesus and are clinging to the cross. So, as a leader, the most effective way for you to care for your group is through the lens of your own need for the gospel and through the lens of other people's need for the gospel. You're not manufacturing mercy. You're passing it on. That's what fuels gospel-powered care.